The US is still not satisfied with the level of death and destruction in Ukraine and is cheering on the conscription of ever younger Ukrainians to be sent as cannon fodder into the meat grinder. Even after a highly public display of Vladimir Putin himself to actually negotiate peace, the neocons are still brushing peace off the table, keeping themselves busy trying to trash talk Tucker Carlson's interview. While there are legitimate criticisms about the interview, and I will talk about these later in the video, the doors that it should open toward peace talks should really not be misunderstood or underestimated. But as always, the neocons want war above all, right? While dressing up as peace-loving little angels. So let's look at some of the latest reactions floating around in collective West media to understand how they're trying to discredit all and any such efforts. Here we go. This is from the first one is from the Washington Pravda, as I call them, because this is really, I mean, the Washington Post is really even worse than the New York Times. It is an absolute utter mouthpiece of the neocon peeps in power. This one here on the 11th of February, yesterday, they write that Tucker Carlson exposed Putin's true war motive. Wait, here it comes. The true war motive is for Russia to own Ukraine. That's what Russia wants. Like, whatever Putin said in this 2-hour speech, it doesn't matter. What he actually wants is to own Ukraine, because the people from the Washington Post, they know Putin, they know his head, they look inside, they see it, they understand it, they see right through the chase. The smart people, not the dumb idiots like Tucker Carlson who just believe something that the leader of another country says. The only leader that we, the propagandized sheep, can believe are our dear leaders in Washington and Berlin and Paris. Those people never lie. They never lie. Only foreign leaders that we hate lie. The leaders in our countries, they never lie. Foreign leaders always lie. It's very simple. I don't know why people don't get that. Let's look at this. For Ukrainians who have been living for more than 2 decades with Putin denying Ukraine's right to exist as a country separate from Russia, the interview sparked only fury. You know, the same Ukrainians who, of course, this is not the real Ukrainians. This is just the Washington propaganda machinery, again using Ukrainians as a excuse for war, right? Just remember that for 8 long years, since the war really began in 2014, and we know that it began in 2014 and then it enlarged in 2022. Even the collective West today calls it the full-scale invasion, right? For 8 long years, Putin did not invade the Eastern Donbass. It didn't even recognize the 2 breakaway republics, Lugansk and Donetsk. It didn't recognize them as independent states. It didn't do it because the Minsk agreements said these 2 territories going to remain in Ukraine, and Ukraine is going to be a whole, excluding the Crimea, admittedly, yes. But the rest was supposed to stay together, and that would have made a lot of sense. Before 2022, Vladimir Putin never had the intention to actually to invade and to go through this carnage, right? So this is another one of these grotesque lies and just ignoring 8 years of politics of what actually happened. Well, for them, perhaps the one shock was that conservative American voters might fall for Putin's litany of lies, half-truths and distortions, including a claim that he wants to negotiate with Washington to end the war, which would mean forcing Ukraine to surrender its territory. Okay, so you can see, like what I already said in the last video, they are panicking about this one, that now Putin is actually on tape, and that millions of people in the US, I think more than 150 million have already watched the Tucker Carlson interview, that over 100 million people have actually heard Putin say, like, we can negotiate. They really hate this one, right? But so this Washington Pravda piece here tries to really turn everything around that Putin said and just negate it, right? The supposed willingness to negotiate, however, contrasts sharply with Russia's long insistence that only Ukraine's total capitulation, including a broad surrender of occupied territory, will end the war. Now, we know from the Istanbul agreements that Putin was more than ready to actually negotiate and see how what the future looked like. So we know from the Minsk agreement, where we have the terms, where we know what was supposed to happen, which the West didn't want to implement, and we know that because Angela Merkel and Christian Hollande and Petro Poroshenko said so, not because Putin said so, because the other three guys said so, that they never meant to actually honor that agreement. But we know that Vladimir Putin wanted to keep Ukraine together, except for Crimea. Yes, Crimea is special, but the rest was supposed to remain together. That was the original plan. But it was also just one of Putin's many misinterpretations during the interview. He also suggested, for example, that Russian troops pulled back from trying to conquer Kiev as part of peace deal, which was later violated by Ukraine. In fact, Russia's forces were defeated and retreated after suffering heavy losses. Again, the Washington Pravda is like spewing out the neocon dogma that whenever Russia retreats, it has nothing to do with actually supporting the negotiations. It is a pure defeat. They're too weak. Therefore, they were defeated. And see, again, like no links, nothing, right? I mean, this propaganda is just so incredibly blatant. It's just in your face. You have to believe this one. If you believe the other one, you're an idiot. And nothing else. A whole piece like that. That's why, like, you know, the New York Times usually has articles that at least dresses up as proper journalism. The Washington Post has completely abandoned this one. Putin just took a couple of hours to say, this is the real message. The Washington Pravda knows the real message is, I must destroy Ukraine because I have no idea what Russia is. Timothy Snyder, a Yale historian who has written extensively on Ukraine and Eastern Europe, posted on X. And Timothy Snyder is one of these Russia warmongering war hawks from the first moment, who was cheering, who was happy when the war finally started, when you could send tons and tons of US weaponry in order to kill as many Russians as possible. So this Timothy Snyder tells us that that because Vladimir Putin is to understand the country that he himself that he's the president of, he wants to destroy Ukraine. These people are so incredibly delusional, and of course the piece ends with the propagandist Carlson spread a stream of idiotism, lies, and heresy. The former prime minister of Ukraine, Yatsenyuk, said, freedom of speech and freedom of lie should not be confused, Comrade Carlson. And Mr. Yatsenyuk, he is warning the American public, you must restrain your people, right? If they continue saying things that we don't like, then we will do something against this. And we by now know that Tucker Carlson has already landed on one of the Ukrainians' hit lists for that mark enemies of the state, and that are meant as kind of death lists, right? So this piece is really quite something, but the others as well. So this is the worst one, but also in the Guardian we have the consensus that is now emerging in the West of how to spin this interview, right? It took them a day or two, but now they seem to have found the key. So the Guardian reports that Putin tells Tucker Carlson the US needs to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. This piece focuses on how Vladimir Putin hates the fact that the West is supplying weapons. Therefore, how they spin it is that this is exactly what we need to do, right? We need to send more weapons because that's what Putin hates. The rambling 2-hour interview. It marked a new level of infamy for Carlson. This is they're not even quoting somebody here. This is the actual journalist Adam Gambut and Andrew Roth actually being very, very objective about things. A rambling interview. New infamy. Russia's message to the US, Putin said, is if you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks, which is exactly true, but the point is he also said we need to negotiate, right? He understands that this cannot be achieved unilaterally and that you need actually a process that leads to that. This is something that's very clear from Putin's interview. This man thinks in processes because he has been inside processes for the last 30 years, political processes, the entire time on different levels, right? Of course, they quote Hillary Clinton, who said Carlson was a useful idiot, and because Hillary Clinton said it, it must be true, because Hillary Clinton would never say anything that's untrue, right? Never. But Russian journalists had already faced long prison sentences for their work and for angering Putin's allies and friends. And then, yeah, of course, you shoot back and say like, okay, Vladimir Putin is horrible to his own journalists. So the only reason why he's giving an interview to an American journalist is because he does propaganda. And actually, that's true. It's actually true. I mean, we must not misunderstand. Vladimir Putin is using this chance at actually doing also a little bit of counter-propaganda. But again, everything is propaganda these days. The Washington Pravda is propaganda. This is propaganda. So we, as educated citizens and viewers of this propaganda, we take this propaganda, we take that propaganda, then we compare, and then we try to figure out what's actually happening, and we try to make up our opinions of what course of action is the best, right? Everything is propaganda. So the fact that Vladimir Putin imprisons journalists in his own country, which he does, has nothing to bear and nothing to do with this interview here, right? Nothing. That's just smoke out there in order to kind of discredit what just was said. And the sad thing is that then the neocons are actually using this moment in order to shore up more support for this horrible warfare in Ukraine, right? If we go to the New York Times, this article doesn't talk about the Tucker Carlson interview, but about something else that's politically happening. Now we're again in the process, right? The process of manufacturing consent for the war, which now the neocons have to ramp up because the Tucker Carlson interview is kind of pushing against that, is that Ukraine, of course, has this problem that they're losing. I mean, the West is still not admitting that Ukraine is really losing. Everybody's talking about a stalemate, but it's really, it's the Ukrainians are being pushed back, and they don't even get the money support anymore from the US. Maybe that will come through in a little bit, but for the moment it seems that only the Europeans are supplying some more funding, and on the battlefield it's not going well. So especially this problem that they don't have enough people. So the New York Times then writes, short on soldiers, Ukraine debates how to find the next wave of troops. A potential expansion of the nation's military draft to replenish the exhausted battered army has become an emotional, politically charged issue. So they report about this problem that inside Ukraine there is not anymore a clear consensus on who should be thrown into the meat grinder. And of course, as always, the New York Times then makes it sound as if though it's actually really necessary that we send more people, right? In a tumultuous week for Ukraine's war effort, Valery Zaluzhny had to step back, the general, and from the country's largest source of weapons and ammunition, the United States hung in doubt in Congress. Yes, so that's what happened. While Ukraine relies on allies for weaponry, replenishing the ranks is a domestic challenge. Yeah, because the collective West has made it abundantly clear that they are not willing to sacrifice their own sons and daughters. They only want Ukrainian sons and daughters to die. So the collective West needs Ukraine to push more people into dying in order to kill a couple more Russians. So, and that's something that we all need to support now, right? In the collective West, go Ukraine, kill more Russians, and if it costs more Ukrainian lives, then so it is, because the last Ukrainian hasn't died yet, right? Small protests have broken out in opposition to parliament proposals to expand the draft to include young men. But so far, lawmakers have slow-walked the measure. Turns out, the draft until now said that only people who were 27 or above had to serve in Ukraine's army. If you were younger than 27, then the draft didn't apply yet, and they want to lower this age to 25. And this is obviously horrible, because anyone having to go to the front lines, and that's what the article actually admits, goes through gruesome scenes. I mean, this is utterly horrible. This total trench warfare, First World War style. And apparently even inside Ukraine, there's no consensus anymore if that should happen, right? Ukraine currently drafts men between 27 and 60 under martial law. All men of 18 to 60 are prohibited from leaving the country, least the decision to taken to draft them. So there's still people between 18 and 27 who could be drafted and who are being put aside. And everybody listening to this. I mean, just imagine how absolutely crazy this is, that we still don't push for having a peace settlement. Even the article then admits that the young generations in Ukraine are actually quite few, because in the 1990s kids didn't have a lot of kids, because economically Ukraine and Russia were doing horribly, because they were going through all these neoliberal readjustments after the end of the Cold War. Readjustments, I mean looting of the state was what was happening. That's why we have all of the few oligarchs and then a lot of others who have a lot of foreigners who have a lot of money. Ukraine and Russia were looted, and this led to reduction in life expectancy and in birth rates and so on. So this generation, of which there's already not a lot of people, they want to push them now, the guys and probably maybe also the girls, into dying in the trenches, just in order to support this project Ukraine. And look at how horrible these graveyards are. I mean, this is massive. We also still don't know exactly how many Ukrainians died, right? This is a number that the Ukrainians must have, that the collective West must possess, right? Because this is one of the things that you really keep track of, but that is never published, right? Because we, the propagandized public, are not supposed to know how horrible the carnage has been on the Ukrainian side. For draft eligible men, warfare is a harrowing prospect. Yes, of course it is. So lowering the draft age, for example, would bring more lithe, healthy soldiers to the fight, but poses long-term risks for sustaining Ukraine's population, given the country's demographic. Look, it's nothing good to bring more young people into the warfare. This is nothing good, New York Times. This is absolutely horrible. These people, this young guy, who is probably 10 years younger than me, playing with his son, is not supposed to go and bleed to death in a trench, right? So if we have the option to bring an end to the war, we should do it. In one move to ease the concerns of men who are called up and want to have children, Parliament is considering a bill to pay medical bills for soldiers who wish to freeze their sperm to allow partners to become pregnant if they die in combat. This is how insane it is. This is where we are. This is being reported, as you know, this is kind of a mitigating policy and strategy in order to incentivize people to be willing to go and die at the front, knowing that their girlfriends and wives can still get pregnant later once they're already dead. Holy Jesus. And I'm an atheist, but this is insane. This is just insane. So all of this is going on. So this cheering on of still more warfare, while we have on the table like an offer to negotiate. Now, I said at the beginning that there is a real and fair criticism of Tucker Carlson's interview, and I want to tell you this. I mean, Ben Norton, whom you're seeing here, he gave a very, very good explanation why Tucker Carlson's interview is actually not concerned mainly with peace, but with shifting the focus of the United States imperial warfare from Russia to China. And this is true. I believe Ben Norton caught this one absolutely correctly. I'll link his video here, and I recommend you watching it, which is that Tucker Carlson is not actually a dove who just wants the United States to retreat from everything, but Tucker Carlson is somebody who would rather focus the United States on China. And there are several others, including Donald Trump, who have said so and done so, although I'm not entirely sure how much that is true anymore. Ben Norton gives a lot of example of the past of how Tucker Carlson used to talk about China. I'm not entirely sure that's his position still. And also with Donald Trump was a China hawk and is, but he also met these people. And he didn't start a war, compared with Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin toward Russia, right? So I'm not entirely sure if that still holds true, but it is the case that that people like Tucker Carlson would rather use the U.S. military to other means and other purposes. Which is why it's right to actually say that he just doesn't want war with Russia, but with others, and especially also when it comes to Latin America, Tucker Carlson is very much an imperialist and has his own designs of how the U.S. empire should be used in order to further a U.S. hegemonic interest. So I find this criticism right, but at the same time, it is also true that Tucker Carlson very much in his interview, made a point for peace with Russia. And, saying that in order to avoid a war with China, we need to have a war with Russia. That's also something that just must not be the case, right? There must be a world in which there's peace between the United States and Russia and China all at the same time, and these superpowers develop next to each other, and the world gets to live in peace with these powers next to each other, right? This must be possible. So I would still say that Tucker Carlson's interview just shows that we, the propagandized sheep, should put pressure on our leaders to actually start the negotiation process, which could start with the Istanbul Agreement. It wouldn't be the end, and it wouldn't be what in the end emerges, but the process needs to be started, and we know that the Russians are willing, and we know that the US and that Ukraine could do it if they chose to do so. So please pick him up, and please start sending diplomats to seriously negotiate the future of a peace in Europe.